Are you looking for a cheap and easy-to-play deck to get yourself into Pauper? The most affordable format for Magic the Gathering? Well then have I got a deck for you. Pauper Bogles, or Selesnya Hexproof as it is sometimes known, is an incredibly powerful deck that isn't hard to pick up and play in the slightest. It's also a deck with a huge pedigree in the format, having won both the Los Angeles Mythic Championship qualifier last year and the Magic Online Pauper Championship just a few weeks ago. Best of all, it won't cost you much more than a meager $50 to get you started playing the best budget format around. If you've seen my videos on Modern Bogles and Pioneer Bogle-less Bogles, then you should have a pretty good idea of how this works. At the very least, I hope you understand the difference between Bogle and Boggle. It boggles my mind that anyone is calling Bogles Bogles still, and yet I hear it everywhere. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a rant. Back to Bogles, the idea is that we're going to take a bunch of very small creatures and suit them up with a bunch of cheap yet powerful auras. Now, normally auras pose a tremendous risk when putting them on any old creature, as a simple spell like Doomblade will have the creature die to removal. But by playing them on creatures with hexproof, or in other words, creatures that can only be the target of spells or abilities we control, then it becomes much more difficult to take out our creatures. As a result, we're free to put however many auras onto our creatures as we want with minimal risk. In Pauper, the creatures that we're suiting up are 4 of the deck's namesake Slippery Bogle, as well as 4 Gladecover Scout and 3 Silhana Ledgewalker. Slippery Bogle and Gladecover Scout are, for the most part, exactly the same. A 1/1 with hexproof that you'll generally be casting for 1 green mana. The differences are subtle, such as Slippery Bogle being countered by Pyroblast, or Gladecover Scout fueling cards like Well-Wisher and Elvish Vanguard when facing an Elves player. But for what we're doing, they're effectively the same. The Silhana Ledgewalkers are 2-mana hexproof 1/1s, but they can only be blocked by creatures with flying. This is actually better than flying for us, as creatures with reach can't block it. It's not always the best, since metas with lots of flyers can easily chump block us, but it's still one of the best hexproof options the format has to offer. Now then, a couple 1/1s won't do anything even if they can't really be killed by traditional removal spells, so it's time to suit them up. We're going to be putting our pants on one leg at a time, starting with the most powerful auras. 3 copies of Rancor and a playset of Ethereal Armor. Elderly Magic players will be more than familiar with the powerhouse known as Rancor, a 1 green mana aura that gives the enchanted creature +2/+0 and trample. That's already an incredible rate, but it gets even better. If Rancor is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, it goes right back into your hand. This means even if your creatures are killed or your auras are wiped out, you'll always have something to play thanks to Rancor. You just have to be careful that your opponent doesn't make you discard it, kill your target before it resolves, or just straight up counter it. If any of those things happen, then you won't get it back. Next up, we have Ethereal Armor. If you watched either of my previous videos on the Bogles archetype, you'll know just how much of a key card this is for the list. For just 1 white mana, Ethereal Armor is an aura that gives the enchanted creature first strike and +1/+1. Wait, did I just say +1/+1? Ha ha ha. I mean it gives +1/+1 for each and every single enchantment you have on your side of the battlefield. You heard me right, this aura packs a tremendous wallop for such a small investment. It's a fantastic rate, even if it's the only enchantment on the battlefield, but it's not hard to see it giving +3/+3 on turn 2 with the right hand, or +7/+7 as more of the game progresses. The deck also runs 1 lone Cartouche of Solidarity. Cartouche? Indeed. This Cartouche not only acts as just a mini Ethereal Armor by giving the creature it enchants +1/+1 and first strike for 1 white mana, but it also does a little bit more. When it enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1 white soldier token with Vigilance. Making a token does a couple of positive things for us. Obviously, we can always use it to attack for extra damage, or as a chump blocker to absorb incoming threats. But the biggest role this card fills in the deck is that it helps your suited up Bogles from Edict effects. These include Chainer's Edict, Geth's Verdict, Diabolic Edict, and even the new Pyreka's Libation. By having these extra small creatures, it allows us to sacrifice them in place of our big creatures. This is also why the deck runs a 1/of Colney Garden, a land that makes a 0/1 plant token when it enters the battlefield. Depending on how many Edict effects you expect to run in your local metagame, you may want to up your counts on cards like these to help you evade them. With our smaller auras out of the way, let's have a look at some of our more expensive heavy hitters and the really fat pants auras. Armadillo Cloak and Ancestral Mask. These powerhouse auras are so good that we're running a full play set of each. They also feature some more unusual templating, so let me break it down for you just a bit what each of them do. Let's start with Armadillo Cloak. Armadillo Cloak is a card that costs 1 green, 1 white, and 1 generic mana for an aura that gives the enchanted creature +2/+2 and trample. In addition, whenever the enchanted creature deals damage, you gain that much life. So it's lifelink, right? No, actually it's not. You see, the way cards like Armadillo Cloak and Spirit Link and Vampiric Link function is actually quite different than life link. The life gain effect would actually use the stack and was treated as its own effect. Hey kids, remember when damage went on the stack? No? Well, that's why you're kids. This also meant that the effect can be stacked more than one. So if you have 2 Armadillo Cloaks or an Armadillo Cloak and lifelink, then you'll gain twice as much life. This was changed roughly around Magic 2010, where cards with lifelink started to show up instead of the older versions. When this happened, nearly every card with the old text and usage stayed functionally the same. This means that Armadillo Cloak's ability still uses the stack, still can be stacked on top of other similar effects, and can even be put onto opposing creatures to negate damage taken. That's right, cast Armadillo Cloak on your opponent's creature, and you'll gain life for all the damage it does to you, or creatures you control. And you still get the benefit on Ethereal Armor of controlling an extra enchantment aura. Pretty neat, huh? It's also critical to note that because this effect uses the stack, unlike life gain, which gains you the life at the same time as damage happens, you need to be careful not to take a lethal hit thinking you'll gain life from the cloak. What will actually happen is that you'll take damage, and the creature with the Armadillo Cloak on it will deal damage to the attacking creature. The life gain trigger will go on the stack, and you'll lose the game due to state-based actions before the trigger can even try to resolve. If that seemed a little too complex, then let's instead check out the other big aura that puts the fattest pants onto your Bogles. Ancestral Mask. Ancestral Mask is an aura for 2 generic and a green that reads, enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment in play. This effect makes your Bogle nothing short of gigantic and can single-handedly close games out by itself. For example, 5 other enchantments means the mask gives your creature +10/+10. The kicker to Ancestral Mask, however, is the way it's worded. It says each other enchantment, meaning if you put this onto a Bogle by itself, the creature gets exactly 0 buffs. Sometimes that's the right play depending on how your hand looks, but oftentimes you'd rather try to suit it up first with some other auras if possible. It also should be noted that the other templating on this actually checks opponents' enchantments too. This means if your opponent is casting things like Curse of the Pierced Heart or Spider Silk Armor, they're actually gonna benefit you. It also means that mirror matches can get outrageously out of hand fast, so be careful with how many auras you end up spitting out. To round out our creature auras, we have 2 copies of Favor of the Overbeing. This card costs 1 generic mana as well as 1 of either green or blue mana, and gives our creature a buff depending on what color it is. For creatures like Gladecover Scout and Silhanar Ledgewalker, it gives them +1/+1 and Vigilance, since they're green creatures. Slippery Bogle, on the other hand, gets an extra +1/+1 and Flying because it's also a blue creature. This makes your creatures not only excellent attackers, but fantastic blockers as well, and downright impossible for some decks like Izzet Fairies to beat in an effective manner. Is it possible for them to win? It is, but it's not likely. These 2 slots are generally the flex slots of the format and allow us to play a versatile amount of options in our list. This includes cards like Cartouche of Strength, Spider Umbra, Lifelink, Fists of Ironwood, or even the new Theros Beyond Beyonce cards, Sentinel's Eyes, and Cetizen Training. Because of just how much versatility there is between these cards, non-hexproof creatures, and additional spells, you'll likely see many different Bogles builds around the internet. The Los Angeles MCQ winners list, for example, ran copies of Commune with the Gods to better find what they needed. What about non-hexproof creatures? For this list, our other slots add in a couple additional creatures and some spells to help close out games a little better. To start us off, we're running one Heliod's Pilgrim. A 1/2 for 2 generic and a white, Heliod's Pilgrim allows you to search your deck for any aura you want and put it into your hand. This allows you to find what you need when you need it, even if it's a little costly to do so. This card just saw a fantastic reprint with gorgeous new art in Theros Bed Bath & Beyond, so it's easier to pick up than ever. Next up is Aura Gnarlid, a 2/2 gnarly beast that costs 2 generic and a green and gets bigger for each aura on the battlefield. 5 auras on the battlefield means +5/+5, making for a cheap 7/7 that, oh, what's this? It also can't be blocked by creatures with power less than it. So yes, the gnarly Aura Gnarlid is killable with the likes of Doomblade. That is what removal does. It removes, but it gets really hard to take down with spells like Lightning Bolt, Scred, Defile, and so on, once you have just a few auras down on the board. Even better, if you wanted to go in a little harder on these, you could even try out the brand new Theros Beyond Theros card, Karametra's Blessing, to help protect it. Rounding out these flex slots are 2 copies of Essence Harvest. One of the freshest pieces of tech for the list, Essence Harvest is 2 generic and a black for a sorcery that reads, target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. This spell allows us to fight through fog effects, like Moment's Peace and Prismatic Strands, and most importantly, gives us a way to fight through Fogtron's Stonehorn Dignitary Lock. Previous Bogles lists ran the card Fling due to the rise of Stonehorn Dignitary Lock decks. The advantage this card gives is that it allows you to cast Fling at instant speed once your opponent has tapped out their mana for counter magic. As it turns out, the card is still pretty vulnerable to the likes of Prismatic Strands, as well as certain specific counter magic like Dispel. In addition, we have to sacrifice the creature. Essence Harvest, however, we don't. Essence Harvest also ignores Prismatic Strands entirely because it's not damage, which is all Strands prevents. An Essence Harvest is rather a loss of life, so it can still take your opponent out. Let's talk color fixing, ramp auras, and lands. To play our off-color cards, as well as play fewer white lands since we're predominantly green deck, we're rocking a bunch of auras that can help filter our mana a little better. A play set of Abundant Growth and 1 Unbridled Growth help make our lands tap for any color and can replace themselves to draw us extra cards. Our playset of Utopia Sprawls come in and only give us 1 set color of mana, but we can make it whatever we need as we put it onto our forest. In addition, Utopia Sprawl can also ramp us, allowing for more or bigger spells to be dropped much more quickly. These cards also benefit us by upping our aura count. It's not uncommon to have 3 or 4 of these on your lands, which makes top-decked copies of Ethereal Armor and Ancestral Mask absolute powerhouses. For our land base, we're running 12 forests, 1 plains, a lone copy of Colney Garden, 2 Crumbling Vestige, and 2 Ash Barrens. The Bogles land base is something that actually changes quite frequently from list to list, and no one can really settle on effectively. Some players run Ash Barrens to find a plains. Some think the plains can dilute what we're trying to do and instead rely on the auras with mostly forests. Some run additional Colney Gardens, and some even try Blossoming Sands. That's actually what I love about Pauper, well, one of the many things. Fine-tune your deck list, experiment in your meta, and build your deck the way that's best for you. This list is by the winner of the Magic Online Pauper Championship event, Kerblinksy, updated ever so slightly for one of their 5-0 league finishes. So we're going to go with what they're rocking for the purposes of this deck tech. For our sideboard, we have a plethora of options at our disposal. This is thanks to our color-fixing auras allowing us the ability to play whatever we want. We start off with 3 copies of Dispel. This helps helps fight back against certain problem spells like a well-timed Electrickery, counter magic, or more importantly, major enchantment hate like Serene Heart, which is basically 2 mana to destroy all auras, per updated Oracle text. Next, we've got 2 Electrickery and 2 Gutshot. Electrickery is the format's premier board wipe spell, allowing us to take care of an army of elves, a flock of fairies, or just the bunch of birds that this format tends to throw at us. It can even, as mentioned previously, be used in the mirror match to wipe out a Bogle in response to an aura being placed on it, though that's not really why it's here. Gutshot is a little more pinpoint, but also doesn't rely quite as heavily on us having our color fixing. Gutshot allows us to kill mana dorks, spell stutter sprites with their counter ability on the stack, or standard bearers that stop us from going off. Next, we have 1 copy of Lifelink as an additional way to gain us some life and better our matchup against decks like Burn or Stompy that might otherwise out-trace us before we can suit up. We're also running 2 copies of Crimson Acolyte, since this can help us as well to push back against the big red decks of the format. It can't be killed, can make other creatures more evasive, and blocks perfectly for just 2 mana. After that is 2 copies of Natural State, a 1 green mana instant that destroys an artifact or enchantment as long as it costs 3 mana or less. While this isn't a perfect answer to everything the format can throw at us, it's still a well-rounded spell that covers a lot of bases. For some more focused answers that you can play in different metas, you can also consider Ray of Revelation, Ancient Grudge, and Gorilla Shaman, or as us old fogies call it, the Mox Monkey. We round out our list with 2 standard bearers to help our mirror match, give us extra bodies against black decks, and stop elves and Stompy from getting too crazy with their plays. Last but not least is a single cartouche of strength to give us some extra power and give us a way to deal with some nasty creatures, especially standard bearer. Now, while this list is not running them, I still want to take a moment to mention a few cards that are excellent for specific metagames if you so choose to try them out. These cards are Flaring Pain, Young Wolf, and Moment's Peace. Flaring Pain is a great way for us to fight back fog effects, which have run rampant throughout the format. Young Wolf sometimes pops up depending on the sheer level of edict effects you may tend to see, although since the release of Cartouche of Solidarity, its popularity has gone down quite a bit. And if we really want to stop some problematic assaults, Moment's Peace provides us the best fog effect we could hope for. This was still more useful in the days of Is It Blitz and Inside Out combo, but again, the meta ebbs and flows, and what was useful once might still be useful again, and even still today can be useful from time to time. Either way, without reason or rhyme, I think that Slippery Bogles might just be the Pauper deck for you. Special thanks to this video's consultant, the Maverick Girl herself, Kendra Smith. If you'd like to see more of Kendra's writing, I will include links in this video's description, as well as thanks to our editor, Jonathan Choi. Targeting our Archaeomancer with Ghostly Flicker, we can return our Flicker back to our hand after it resolves. Flicker, however, requires us to hit 2 targets, and that's where this gets extra evil. By choosing Chittering Rats as our second Flicker target, we can repeatedly make our opponent put cards from their hand on top of their deck, both depriving them of cards to play with as well as future draw steps. The reason we call this deck Ratlock is because of this combo. Once your opponent is left with no cards in their hand, we can simply cast Ghostly Flicker on an Archaeomancer and a Chittering Rats during our opponent's draw steps after they've drawn their card for turn, thus ensuring